Hello, thank you once again for joining me. Today we are going to make some Santa hats. Quite a few Santa hats, actually. I'll show you the details on one, and then show you a simpler method on another, and then show you the final results at the end. So without further ado, here we go. So the first thing we're going to do is measure our doll's head. I decided to start with smart dolls since, well, I love my smart dolls, right? And that's the place to start. They're a good SD size. I ended up getting 23 centimeters. And then I decided I needed the length of the hat, you know, the height of it. I wanted it to hang cutely at just the right spot, and I ended up with 17 centimeters. So we're kind of making a cone with a curved bottom. And I started just measuring, seeing if my piece of paper was even going to be big enough, and it was. So after adding a half a centimeter to both sides, I just started sketching the rounded bottom and double checking my measurements. It was looking pretty good. Then I needed to find the middle, and unfortunately my nice clear plastic ruler is all in inches, and I almost exclusively use centimeters for dolls, so that was kind of annoying. But I measured the 17 inches, and I did that from our original tick marks, and of course found out that one side was shorter than the other, which we don't like, so we fixed that. A lot of my drafting is just measuring and more measuring. Anyway, so those edges are 17 inches, and then we're going to add our seam allowance on top of that, and we've pretty much got a piece. We're not adding any seam allowance to the bottom edge because I don't plan on really finishing it. Now that we've got our piece cut out, I did use the pinking shears on the sewn edges, and on the unsewn edge I'm just going to use a little bit of fray check to make sure that my flannel stays where it needs to and doesn't become a big mess underneath the fluff. So now we are gonna flip our sewing machine over. I had been doing dark knits, so we take all the thread out. We don't need those twin needles. We swap that for a single needle, and we don't really need the walking foot either. So I just put a regular foot back on. You don't need to take your needle out to swap your feet, but it does make things a lot easier. Alright, so now when deciding what side to start sewing from, if you have the luxury, sometimes you don't, but when you do, always pick the side that gives your little grippies on the bottom there more to connect with. The more they can touch your fabric, the better off you're going to be. So starting at the tip of the hat is not really recommended in this case. So I didn't quite sew as much over the edge as I wanted to, so I went over it a second time just because the tip could unravel and I don't want that. Then we cut out some of that extra fabric so that when we do turn it inside out, there's less bulk inside. When you're turning it inside out, you are going to want something pointy but not sharp. If it's sharp, it's going to stab through the actual fabric. You just want it pointy enough to get a good point. Now she looks like a gnome. I do enjoy the gnome. A gnome hat is just a Santa hat that doesn't have any fluff on it. Anyway, so we know it fits, and now we're kind of looking at our fluff here. I wanted to show you, it's the faux fur style, so of course it's all polyester. When you cut it, you don't want to cut your fluff, though. You only want to cut the back side where it's actual fabric, and even when you do that, you end up with so much extra fluff. It just falls out everywhere. This is a very messy material to use. I am clamping it down because I don't like accidentally stabbing myself when I'm hand sewing. So I just use my little clamps there. And just to show, that's the little puff balls I got. Those are pretty easy to find in the craft store. Now I am going to hand sew the fluff. I find out later, because I am making so many of these, that fabric glue works just as good. So if you decide to hand sew it, make sure that you don't stab it all the way through the fluff, because you don't want to catch it and then have to try to pull it out. So you just want to nick that fabric so that you're not affecting what it looks like from the outside. And you just kind of go all along, tacking it down in a really loose whip stitch. If you pull it too tight, you're going to wrinkle the fabric, and you don't want that. Once you get to the end, it is worth taking special care to make sure that you get the corner pieces to stay down. It just kind of makes it a little bit more seamless from the outside. Oh man, that fluff, it's just everywhere. So for a poof ball or little pom-pom top, if you're sewing it, you do want to be careful and make sure that you're not just sewing the fluff itself. Like, you want to actually get through the middle of the poof ball. So I was pretty careful to do that. And you'll want to tack it down at least 3 times. Anything more than that might be a little bit of overkill. But anything less than that and you risk it falling off later or loosening up, you know. So pretty quick to just tack it on 3 times and then tie her in a knot and you're good to go. Knocked her glasses. There we go. Okay, so it looks adorable, but yeah, that poof ball is just not heavy enough to hold that down. So rather than tack it in place permanently, I decided to go with a safety pin. I like this because it gives me the option to readjust the hat later, or if I want it to stand up for whatever reason, I can. And I just pin it from the back, make sure the pin doesn't go all the way through so you don't see it, and then it's just fine. And this also gives you the option to, like, yeah, check it out, rearrange it a little, give you a slightly different look if you need it. Oh yes, bonus footage of all of the million hats that I made. There was so many. You don't realize how many dolls you've collected until you have to make each and every one of them a Santa hat. So many. I filmed this just to show that, like, the fabric glue really did work just fine, and it was infinitely faster. So we've got all the same stuff, and rather than hand sewing, I used Fabri-Tac fabric glue. I like this stuff because it is waterproof when it dries, it's clear, and it dries quite fast, and yeah, it's just good stuff. Now, I showed you the clamp there for a hot second because I had originally clamped my first one and glued a bunch of flannel to my clamps, so I can't really recommend that unless you're willing to sacrifice your clamps. Otherwise, though, the fabric glue really does hold it in place. Like, it didn't need to be clamped. I didn't clamp any of the other ones and it was totally fine. So, highly recommend. Fabric glue is a much better option. And then I go around and I just squish it real good, make sure the fabric glue gets all the way through everything. And you can even do it with the pom-pom. So I get to the very meaty center of the pom-pom, plop it on, and then you just wrap all of the fluff around it, and you're good to go. Well, thank you so much for joining me. We have many, many tiny Santa hats to show off for our work, and you can see why I ended up going with the glue method for the majority of them. The hand sewing did take a very long time, and to make this many of them, well, I didn't really want to spend more than a day. So I just want to say, though, thank you so much for joining me. Please hit that like and subscribe to see more fun content in the future.